How's this druggie correcting me the Qur'an? It'd be very strange to have someone who's 10 years of age and hasn't memorized the Qur'an. And now I'm going to take you back to my friend Anas. He used to come lead Taraweeh and he would not prepare anything and not even stutter once. Somalia, the land of Huffadh, the land that produces up to 15,000 Huffadh every single year. And those Huffadh, likewise, being between the ages of 5 and 10. Winning Qur'an competitions all around the world, representatives from different nationalities, but their origin being from Somalia. What is it that makes their Qur'an so strong? What is it that makes their connection with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so embedded within their lives? Inshallah ta'ala, these are the things that we are going to be exploring in this episode, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Now, Somalia is known for being a country that the first thing that comes to your mind is the Qur'an. The first thing that comes to your mind is the people who are connected to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of its memorization, in terms of its reading, and in terms of generally it being a part of their culture and identity. You probably have a friend in your school that was the Huffadh of the Qur'an. You probably have someone who used to come to masjid. Likewise, the majority of the imams that you might have come across, a lot of them will be Somali. So what is it that's so special? Now, the first point, inshallah ta'ala, I'm actually going to speak about is one that has nothing necessarily to do with the actual method itself, but rather it's a cultural thing. Now, it's not rare, neither is it absurd for you to find a young Huffadh of the Qur'an who's 7, 6 years of age, 8 years of age. In fact, back home in Somalia, it will be very strange to have someone who's 10 years of age and hasn't memorized the Qur'an. Now this is the first thing. The Qur'an starts from young. The Qur'an is not something that, you know what, you do your secular studies, your secular education, and then when you get to 10, 13, 15, you might memorize 1, 2 juz of the Qur'an in a madrasa. No. When it comes to Somalis, the number one thing that they start with from a young age, saying 3 years of age, 4 years of age, is you go to madrasa and you don't learn anything else. This is with no exaggeration. Like you don't study Arabic along with the Qur'an, / I'm going to study maths along with the Qur'an. Everything in life is paused for the child. And there's nothing he studies but the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before I continue, join our community of 80,000 people on their journey learning the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subscribe now and make sure you never miss a video. Now what that leads to is the culture being one that the Qur'an is not for those only that are going to become sheikhs, or are going to become du'at, or going to, no. You have the tradesman, the businessman who knows the Qur'an, the taxi driver knows the Qur'an, because he learnt it when he was young. And as Imam al-Shafi'i, he says that learning when you're young, memorizing something when you're young, is like inscribing something on a stone, on a rock. Okay? And learning something when you're older in age is like writing in the ocean. If you don't, of course, work harder on it, you might forget it a lot easier. It's actually very interesting. I have a story. When I was in Somalia about 5, 6 years ago, I was studying there in Somalia. One day I went inside a taxi, and this is a perfect example to show and prove that regardless of who you are, regardless of your background, your job, the field of expertise, regardless of who you are, shopkeeper knows the Qur'an, taxi driver knows the Qur'an, as I said, the mother, the father, everyone knows the Qur'an. I was in a taxi and I was reviewing my Qur'an, I was reading my wird, and until today I remember exactly where I was reading, and I remember where this incident happened within the Qur'an as well, in the exact location, because it was such a profound thing. So unfortunately the driver, the taxi driver, he was consuming this herb, which is usually illegal. Let's say similar to smoking. Islamically it's haram as well. It's not something which is allowed. Okay? So he has this addiction, he's got it next to him, and I think he was actually smoking as well. So we're in the car driving, I started reading my wird. And I remember it was the beginning of Surah Yunus. And as I was reading, I said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام را تلك آيات الكتاب المبين. He said, Hakim. I said, Mubin. He said, Ayatul Hakim. I said, oh, is it? I looked on my phone and he was right. So I continue reading. كان للناس عجبا أن أوحينا إلى رجل منهم أن أنذر الناس وبشر الذين آمنوا أن لهم قدم صدق عند ربهم قال الكافرون إن هذا لسحر مبين. He said, "What yeah? Do you not know the Quran?" And he's there going on with his drugs and whatever. He said, "Inna hadha la sahirun mubin." I was like, "Oh my God, this is embarrassing." I got very embarrassed, I'm not gonna lie. So I just completely stopped, because initially I'm thinking, how is this druggie correcting me in the Quran? It's like you've been in the UK, you know, and there's I don't know, someone who's an alcoholic, for example, or something, and he's driving you or something like that, and he's correcting your Quran. You wouldn't take him seriously, yani. That's when I said to myself, wow. I just said, Ajib. I said, hey, this man who I'm probably seeing as, he does not know any Quran, and he probably needs me to give him da'wah and tell him you're on the road to Jannah. But he's correcting him in my Quran. So that's when I said, wow, subhanAllah. And to add on to that as well, because the benefit here is that Somalis, the Quran is not, it's not something for the sheikh. This is a taxi driver who is a druggie, in speech marks, what we would consider a druggie in the UK, for example, and he's correcting me as a student of knowledge, because I was studying at that time in Somalia, and he's correcting me in my Quran. So it was a humbling experience, but it also made me appreciate that the Quran is something which is embedded from young in the lives of the Somalis. This is the number one thing. This is the number one thing. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if this man perhaps doesn't read the Quran often now. He was in his 40s. So that also made me think, wait, he probably, because of what he's doing, again, this might be me making assumptions, etc., but these are assumptions based on evidences. They're not random assumptions. You know, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Inna ba'd al-dhanni ithm." Ibn al-Qayyim, he took from this verse, he said, not all assumptions are evil and bad. If you have an evidence, a muqarana, yani you have something that is, you know, giving you an idea of something, it's not really the best, you know, worst thing. So anyway, I said to myself, he probably doesn't read the Quran much, but he corrected me, and I believe it's based upon his memorization when he was young. That's what I believe. I believe he memorized the Quran at such a young age, with 100% perfection, that now he doesn't necessarily read Quran much, but it's almost yani, like a tape in his head. It just can't leave him, basically. So anyway, that's the first thing. As we said, 5 to 10 years of age is the average, age of someone who's memorized Quran in Somalia. It's rare that you go to a masjid and you have 25-year-olds memorizing the Quran the way it is in the UK. It's not a bad thing even in the UK, but you won't see that. In Somalia, it does not exist. There's no ma'had or like madrasas and stuff for elders. There's no actual service where elders go and memorize the Quran. That does not exist. And you can try it out. Go to Somalia, go to every single place where they study the Quran, it does not exist. So that's the first thing. The Quran is something you start from a young age. The second thing is that the Quran being something, of course, from a young age, but it's also embedded within the actual culture. What does that mean? And the Quran is not seen as an extracurricular activity. It's not something where it's like, you know what, we have our life, we have the normal daily chores or something like that, and then as a side thing, the Quran, will take part every now and then, and it's like an extracurricular activity. No. For Somalis, it's not like that. Somalis is part of the actual culture. As I said, you've learnt it when you're young, but then during your day, the Quran is something which is a part of it. For example, a mother will be cooking food. Either she's playing the Quran or she's actually reviewing the Quran herself. Again, this is a common thing, normal thing. Your father is going to be at work, and I saw this myself again in Somalia. Your father's at work. I remember it was actually exchange service, money exchange company. I went inside, and the man who's there, who's doing the actual exchange, he's there, he's got his Quran open, and he's reviewing it. And as he's reviewing it, he's closing it, and he's continuing to read. And then the customer comes, he does whatever he needs to do, the customer goes, he continues reading, and then he closes it again. This is the man at the exchange. But he sat there reading the Quran, and then he closes it. Of course, it's a picture, so you can't see the closing part. And he continues to read. And you can see he's an old man as well. He's not like a young person. My point is that the Quran is not seen as a side thing. It's not seen as an extracurricular activity that you do on the side, and it isn't a part of your daily normal life. La. The Quran is embedded. If you're a doctor, If you are, as I said, a taxi man, if you're this, this is part of your life. This is something that you're going to be doing within your day. It's very common likewise for Somalis to have Quran circles in the house, and the house to be vibrant with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I remember us ourselves, and this is the UK by the way, us ourselves, my father, I remember before we go to school, we would have a Quran circle. You'd say, everyone open your Quran. And you have to read your Quran. You have to, before you go to school, it's a normal thing. Now you're probably thinking, why is that so special for the Quran specifically? And what I mean by that is, we wouldn't have that for other things. We wouldn't have that for hadith books, which again is a good thing. We're not saying for you to read Riyadh al-Salihin, for example, which a lot of cultures do, where you sit down and you go through hadith books, the speech of the Prophet ﷺ. Somalis is the Quran. Somalis is the Quran. The Quran comes with the barakah, the Quran comes with, it's a very, very common thing within all age groups, all backgrounds, all majors, regardless of what you're doing, the Quran is part of your day as well. So I think before we move on to the method itself, these two things are the foundation. Because once you have the foundation, everything else comes after that anyway. So the first two things which I want to emphasize on is starting at very young age, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, memorize the Quran. Oh, is it? Okay, mashallah, well done. That's it. Nothing big. You don't make it a big deal. No problem. 8 years of age, he's memorized the Quran. So that's one. The second thing being, the Quran is part of the actual daily thing. It's part of the actual culture. It's part of the actual identity of the Muslim himself. Regardless of what he's going to pursue in his life, that is the foundation laid as well. Now, before we go on to the methods, I think these 2 points are the most important, and they are the ones that I believe make the Somalis, I don't want to say that level above others, because there's other, as we know, the Mauritanians and Egyptians, they're also amazing at the Quran. But what I believe makes the Somalis special when it comes to the Quran are these 2 things. These 2 things are the most profound in terms of the Somalis themselves. Now the actual method that the Somalis use to make sure the Quran is embedded. They are also 2 main things. The first one is the Lawh method. Is this wooden board, if you want to call it, and it's literally a Lawh. It's a board. It's not made out of paper, and it's amazing because when the young boy comes or the young girl comes to the madrasa at this small age, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's no mushaf. There's no actual mushaf. There's no actual Quran that they read from, sit down and memorize. That does not exist in Somalia. SubhanAllah, there's a brother I know, he used to lead in our local masjid in Dar es Salaam. His name is Anas, Somali brother. He is a full-on Somali, okay? He's Somali. This man, Allahumma barik lahu, he is for me, and he was, and until today he's my inspiration when it comes to the Quran. Why? Because what he used to do is, he used to come lead Taraweeh every single year, and he would not prepare anything. And I mean that, by the way. Like, I genuinely mean it. He wouldn't prepare anything. And he would lead and not even stutter once. And his recitation would be connected. And he would recite. One ayah. And his tone was consistent. Well, it wasn't really hadar, but it was consistent. He would come in his normal clothing. He used to wear trousers and his shirt and normal. He had a normal professional job. He would go inside the Imam's thing, put his, thobe on, put his hat on, and go lead the salah. No stuttering at all. And then he would come and he would correct the other Imam when it's his turn. Now, I asked him something, and there's times that we would review the Quran, for example, we had Subac in the actual masjid, etc. And you know what he said to me? He goes, I don't know where this ayah is on the page. He goes, I don't know where it is. Is it on the left side or right side? I have no clue. I said, what do you mean you have no clue? This was the beginning when I was actually getting to know him. I said, what do you mean you have no clue? Because for us who memorize the Quran in the UK, you have the left and the right, and you know if you're reading the left or if you're reading the right. You know if the verse you're reading is in the middle of the page, the first third of the page, last third of the page. You can probably even tell exactly which line it is as well. The verse where it ends, you probably know as well. He said, I have no clue in any of this. I said, why? He said, because when I memorized the Quran, we used the wooden board, and we were given ink. So this is the Lawh method now, okay? We were given ink, Literally the way you see back in the day, not actual pen. You're literally given like a brush with actual ink. You dip it in. And then your teacher would read the verse to you. So you'd say, Alif Lam Ra, you write. Tilka Ayatul, right. Kitab al-Hakim, right. Verse ends there, he tells you that's the end of the first verse. Akana lin-nasi, right. Akana lin-nasi. Ajaban, right. An awhayna ila rajulin minhum an anzir an-nas. You have to write it as he's reciting to you. If you want him to repeat it, no problem. Could you go back? Akana lin-nasi, what's after it? You write it. So technically, you're making your own mushaf to memorize from. And subhanAllah, for me, this is one of the greatest miracles of the Qur'an. Imagine someone's coming to you saying, I have no clue where on the mushaf I'm reading, but his memorization is 10 out of 10. Like he's actually not making any mistake. And do you know what I realized? This is one of the best ways to memorize. Do you know why? Because if we look at Surah Al-Fatiha, the majority of the people don't know where it is. Most people don't know that it's just a circle in the Qur'an and it's not the actual whole page. Like if you look at the Mus'haf, you have Surah Al-Fatiha, and inshallah this is an action point. Everyone get their Mus'haf out and check. You have Surah Al-Fatiha, it's literally a circle. And then you have Surah Al-Baqarah starts, which is the beginning as well of Surah Al-Baqarah, is not a whole page. The first time in the Qur'an that you have an entire page that is 15 lines of the Uthmani Mus'haf is إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ أَنذَرْتَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ. But most people have memorized Surah Al-Fatiha, and little do they know where it is on the page. That's just a small circle. You don't know this. That is because you haven't necessarily, you haven't relied on you learning from the actual Mus'haf. You've heard it so much. So the Lawh method, ala kulli hal, you get your ink, you start writing. Of course, one of the things you need to do before you start learning the Qur'an, step one, is to learn imla, which is the actual Arabic alphabet and how to write in the Arabic language. Now once you do that, you write out the entire page. That's where now you're going to sit down and you're going to memorize. The reason why this student doesn't know where on the Uthmani Mus'haf the ayahs are on is because it depends how small your writing is. So your Mus'haf that you memorize from, meaning if you've done the Lawh method, the wooden board method, your verses are going to be different in terms of where they are compared to mine. Because maybe I've written a bit bigger, I've written smaller text, for example. It's going to be different. Now, what are the benefits of this? The first benefit is you're using more of your senses. So number one, you're actually using your hand, which is the feel sense. You're writing down, and at the same time you're looking, and at the same time your teacher is reciting it to you. So you're doing three things in one go. You're looking, but whilst you're looking as well, akana lin-nasi, for example, you're hearing it whilst you're looking at it, and your pen is actually, so your brain is following along whilst you're writing at the same time as hearing, all simultaneously, and at the same time you're looking at it as well. So what we have basically is all your senses are working at the same time simultaneously. Now what this will do, bi'idhnillah, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, is that it will make the initial memorization of the Qur'an strong, and it will root it a lot more in your brain, because your brain is working harder and has been aided with all of these other senses at the same time as well. You know what, in fact, let's inshallah demonstrate it. We've got something here, and inshallah we can show you an example of what it would be, not necessarily with a board itself, because unfortunately we don't have that here, but let's inshallah ta'ala try to demonstrate exactly what we're talking about. Let's go over here. We have a mushaf here which is empty. So this would be the actual Lawh itself. So imagine it's an actual board like we've seen. We're going to now go and demonstrate exactly what it would be like, where the teacher is going to basically recite the portion that I'm going to be reading bit by bit, and I'm expected to scribe. I have to continue writing, and then once my portion is done, we'll show you what happens after that, inshallah ta'ala. Surah Yunus, for example. Alright, so here obviously we have Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So my teacher is now, I've come to the class, I've sat down, my teacher is literally in front of me. I've got my board, of course we have actual mushaf which is empty here. My teacher is now going to give me my portion to memorize, okay? The way he's going to do it is, he's literally just going to start reading. I have no clue whatsoever where it is in the Qur'an. I'm literally getting this directly from my teacher, and I'm just going to start writing, okay? So this is my portion, inshallah ta'ala. He will begin to start telling me the portion. Bismillah.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Alif Lam Ra. Tilka ayatul kitabil hakim.
Aye. تلك آيات الكتاب. I'll confirm that with him. So I say تلك آيات الكتاب الحكيم, and then he would say if that's correct or not. If there's any mistake, he would say kitab. For example, I put a dhamma on there or something, like I would read it to him. I'd say Alif Lam Ra تلك آيات الكتاب الحكيم. So one of the great benefits is that even though the actual recitation, when I read it, is correct, tilka ayat, that's correct, there's nothing wrong with that. My teacher, once I finish writing my portion, I would show him if I've written it correctly. He would actually catch me out on something here. The rasm of the mushaf, the ayat here is actually a small alif. So he would cancel this out and make me write actual hamza, correct? He would actually tell me, no, this part is wrong. And the benefit here is you would know how the Qur'an is written. Even though the Arabic here would be correct in a normal text, he would show you that the Qur'an, the actual rasam, the text of the writing is incorrect. So here we learn that someone who's memorized the Qur'an from the mushaf might not know the actual writing of the mushaf in comparison to someone who's used the Lawh itself. He knows exactly the way the Qur'an is written in its exclusive special format as well. أكان للناس. Okay, carry on. عجبا. Stop. عجبا. Stop. عجبا. عجبا أن أوحينا إلى رجل. Stop. أن أنذر الناس. أن أنذر. It's not easy here. You see that? The child, when he's young, he's literally spent perhaps a year before he goes to the madrasa, learning purely and only the writing itself. So he's already going, like he knows what's here, what's there. And obviously I'm currently writing with the normal Arabic. He's learned before he goes to the madrasa the specific writing of the Qur'an. So he's almost like a computer who's ready to just start writing before his teacher actually starts. Okay? And أنذر الناس وبشر. So look here, I missed that there, you see that? So I missed here. إلى رجل, I missed the minhum. So my teacher would catch me up on that again as well. So the student, when he's writing that, you'll see that the teacher is stopping him and saying, no, you've missed out this word, you've missed out that word. In the Qur'an, if someone's actually memorizing from the mushaf itself, he's not necessarily going to be stopped on this or that. He would have already memorized. Like right now, imagine you're going through, you're saying, إِلَى رَجُلٍ أَنْ أَنذِرِ النَّاسِ إِلَى رَجُلٍ أَنْ أَنذِرِ النَّاسِ, and you're using the actual mushaf. You would have memorized it wrong. You'd have already memorized it wrong. But before you memorize, your teacher's correcting you on all this stuff. So we're not going to finish the whole thing, inshallah. That is an example of the teacher's reading, but he's reading, of course, a bit slower. And you have to write. So now what do we have? We have the entire page that I've been told to memorize. I now give it to my teacher. My teacher is going to proofread and see if everything's correct, if it's not correct, etc., etc. So once my teacher has proofread for me, because he's done this process already, he already knows it off the top of his head. Theoretically, what we would have is a full page where we've got the entire page has been written out, or the portion that I'm reading specifically, or memorizing, but in the correct writing. And do you know what the teacher's going to do? He's going to tell you that you wrote this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. And he's going to give you principles, qawaid, of writing, so that you know them for later. For example, the alif. He'd say, look, alif when it's written with this is always written like this, because it's going to come up later and later again anyway, often. Now is where the hard work starts. When I say hard work, it's hard work for people who don't write it first. But for the person who's written it out on the Lawh, it's actually a lot easier. But when I say hard work, this is where the actual memorization now begins. Step one was to write it out. This person who's now written out this page, he has registered in his brain what this page looks like. He's registered in his brain the principles of the actual text itself. He's also registered in his brain using the three senses simultaneously. So he somewhat knows that page. But the only thing is, he doesn't know it as a long-term memory. By the way, there are kids, and I've seen this with my own eyes when I went to Somalia. Once they've written out this page, they've memorized it. Like literally, no exaggeration. They'll give it to their teacher and they're able to read it to their teacher on the spot. And do you know what's amazing? They've never seen that page before in their life. So this proves that merely writing the page out will actually make it go in your brain. You've memorized it, but you have not memorized it for long-term memory. So the second step now is to actually gain long-term memory of this. And this is now what people do in the UK. So in the UK, we skip the first stage basically. So what we're doing now is we sit down and we repeat each verse 200-300 times. So we would start with say Alif Lam Ra Tilka Ayatul Kitab al-Hakim Alif Lam Ra Tilka Ayatul Kitab al-Hakim Alif Lam Ra Tilka Ayatul Kitab al-Hakim. Just repeat whilst you're looking. And you need to remember, this is something you've already written with your own hand. So the senses are all working together now. Now you're trying to really allow it to go in. So what do? You now close, you test yourself on that verse. Then the next verse. أَكَانَ لِلنَّاسِ عَجَبًا أَنْ أَوْحَيْنَا أَكَانَ لِلنَّاسِ عَجَبًا أَنْ أَوْحَيْنَا أَكَانَ لِلنَّاسِ عَجَبًا أَنْ أَوْحَيْنَا. This verse is quite long, so you need to split it up, of course. But you memorize the whole verse. إِلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنْهُمْ أَنْ أَنذِرِ النَّاسَ إِلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنْهُمْ أَنْ أَنذِرِ النَّاسَ إِلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنْهُمْ أَنْ أَنذِرِ النَّاسَ أَكَانَ لِلنَّاسِ عَجَبًا أَنْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنْهُمْ أَنْ أَنذِرِ النَّاسَ وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَكَانَ لِلنَّاسِ عَجَبًا أَنْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنْهُمْ أَنْ أَنذِرِ النَّاسَ وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَكَانَ لِلنَّاسِ عَجَبًا أَنْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنْهُمْ أَنْ أَنذِرِ النَّاسَ وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Repetition. What people need to realize is memorizing the Qur'an, there's no way around it. There's no easy way. There's no fast way. Many people tend to ask, what's a quick way to memorize the Qur'an? Wallahi, there's nothing special. Someone who's repeated it more than you knows it better than you, period. So they would repeat. And then what do? Connect the two verses. Alif Lam Ra Tilka Ayatul Kitab al-Hakim Akana lin-nasi ajaban an awhayna ila rajulin minhum an anzir an-nasa. Alif Lam Ra Tilka Ayatul Kitab al-Hakim Akana lin-nasi ajaban an awhayna ila rajulin minhum an anzir an-nasa. Alif Lam Ra Tilka Ayatul Kitab al-Hakim Akana lin-nasi ajaban an awhayna ila rajulin minhum an anzir an-nasa. So they connect in verse 1 and 2. They do the same thing with verse 2 and 3, verse 3 and 4, verse 4 and 5, verse 5 and 6, verse 6 and 7, until they get to the end of the portion they're memorizing. Once they've got to the end of the portion that they are memorizing, and they have connected the consecutive verses 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5, 5 and 6, 6 and 7, etc. They've memorized the verses. Now they need to connect the entire page. So what do? They'll sit down and just repeat the entire page from the top all the way to the bottom. 100 times, 200 times, 300 times, depending on the person. Once they have done that, this portion is never going to leave their head. They don't just know it now. First of all, they'll be able to read it to their teacher with absolute ease, but they will never, ever forget this page. This is literally like writing on concrete. Why? They've written it with their hands, they've seen it with their eyes, they've heard it, their teacher read. And do you know what's even more amazing? This is how it was before. This is how it was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, what would he do? He would call the companions and he would say, write this. In fact, let's go back. Jibreel alayhi salam would come to the Prophet ﷺ. He would say, Iqra. He would read to him and then he would expect him to read back. And then the Prophet ﷺ, what would he do? He would recite to the companions and then he would say, write from me whatever I recite to you. Then the companions would write it, like Zayd ibn Thabit and the other companions who used to be the scribes of the Prophet ﷺ. Once they have written it, what would they do? He would say, hey, read from me what you've written. And then they would recite whatever they've written. He would say, yes, you're correct. This is the way it was done. And then the companions, what they would do? They would sit down and they'd memorize it. So this is the method that they do. But it doesn't just stop there now. We have the last step. Something that you have memorized, you have consolidated, it's in your brain. Now you need to make it a part of your life. This is where we call it a revision, but for Somalis it's not revision. For Somalis it is maintaining your relationship with the Book of Allah. It's not revised, it's not la. We have something called Subac. That student, he's been there now for maybe 2 to 3 hours. His teacher has recited to him his portion. He's followed and written it. He's sat down, memorized it. He's read to his teacher. You're not going anywhere. Now you're going to sit down with the rest of the students and you are going to read together in the method of Subac 5, 6, 7 ajza of the Qur'an. And this is every single day. So what do? 5, 6 students, you come together. With the teacher as well, the teacher joins. For him, it's his reviewing as well. You sit down 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 students. And then you start. One person reads one verse. The next person reads another verse. The next person reads one verse. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim wa ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alif Lam Mim, Dhalika al-kitabu la rayba fihi hudan lil muttaqin, alladhina yu'minuna bil ghaibi wa yuqimuna as-salata wa Continue. Ali Imran is done. Nisa is done. We'll stop there today. And then the next day, 5, 6 juz. Minimum. Every 7 days, you're completing the entire Qur'an. And what the teacher would normally do is, of course, you haven't memorized the entire Qur'an. Once you finish the Qur'an, that's the case. But he would split you up in the groups of how much Qur'an you know. So let's say group 1 has got to Surah Tawbah, 10 juz of the Qur'an. That is your group. So you guys are going to be reading 5 juz and 5 juz. So first day 5 juz, the second day 5 juz in this Subac method where you read one verse each, sometimes one page each. So every 2 days, what have you just done? You've completed the 10 juz that you've memorized. Every 2 days you're finishing from Surah Baqarah all the way to Surah Tawbah because that's what you've memorized. You finish another juz, you add it in. You finish the next juz, you add it in. Okay, now you're on Surah Kahf. It's 15 juz of the Qur'an. Now you're going to do 5 juz per day. Every 3 days you finish what you've done. The person who now, after 2-3 years, he's got to Surah An-Nas, which is the end of the Qur'an, how many times has he read whatever he's memorized? He's read it many times. If every single day you're doing 5 juz, there's no way you can forget it. It's not possible. And now I'm going to take you back to my friend Anas, who used to lead in the masjid. When I said to him, how is your Qur'an so strong? First I asked him, how many hours do you prepare before you come to Tarawih? He goes, what do you mean prepare? You sit down, you're doing from here to here, the Imam tells you, you need 2-3 hours in the day. He goes, no, come on. He said, someone who's read this place that he's gonna read in the Salah, someone who read it 3-4 days ago, why does he need to revise it? I go, how did you read it 3-4 days ago? Because I read 10 juz per day. So this portion I'm going to read in the Taraweeh, I've read it 2-3 days ago. And throughout the year I've read it, 100 times, for example. Someone who's read this place 100 times, more than 100 times, he is not going to need to revise to lead Taraweeh. And just think about it logically. If every single week you're finishing the entire Qur'an from A to Z, and you have been also doing that whilst you've been memorizing the Qur'an during your journey, you've probably read the Qur'an from the top of your head over 1,000 times perhaps. Of course, we're talking about over the course of 10-15 years of your life. Now, just to be clear, this Subac method is what truly makes the Somali community what they are when it comes to the Qur'an. Because, okay, amazing, you've written out the Qur'an, you've memorized it and read to your teacher, but what's next? What's going to allow you to keep it and solidify it even more and more is this Subac method. So a Huffadh, someone who's memorized the Qur'an, who's not finishing the Qur'an every week at minimum, this person is, inshallah, he will have the Qur'an, but it won't be to the Somali caliber, if you want to call it. So the Subac method is what is going to differentiate between the Somali and the non-Somali. That is where the penny drops, inshallah ta'ala. But of course, there's prerequisites. You have to do the Lawh method first, read to your teacher, do the Subac within the class, and then you need to, of course, continue doing the Subac as a cultural thing. What's quite funny as well is when the students are doing the Subac, this is actually mentioned in one of the scholars, Sheikh Abdul Ahad al-Sufi, in his father's masjid, rahimahullah ta'ala, Sheikh Ali Sufi, he said when we used to do the Subac, the person who gets it wrong, he would have water splashed on him, cold water. So there's this element to the Subac itself of accountability and an element of fun to it as well. You have to make sure you know the portion that you're going to be reading with your group, and if you don't get it, you're going to have a bucket of water splashed all over you. So this is the method, inshallah ta'ala, that makes the person's Qur'an go from 0 to hero, inshallah ta'ala. To conclude, now we have what we call the final element to the Qur'an being so strong when it comes to the Somali community. Every single year, the Huffadh, they prepare for what we call the international Qur'an competitions. Now, hundreds and thousands of pounds are spent every single year in these competitions. Hundreds and thousands of pounds. We're speaking about booking halls, flights. We're talking about the hotels for the competitors. Hundreds of thousands of pounds are spent in these Quran competitions. Now, what is the student doing? He's preparing himself to be tested from A to Z, with prizes going up to $20,000, sometimes $30,000, sometimes $40,000. These students, after preparing their Quran for themselves, they're given the opportunity to put themselves to the test as well. And this is finally the last element to solidifying your Quran and making sure, inshaAllah ta'ala, that it is like Fatiha for you, the entire Quran. So having a combination all over these elements, the first one being that the Quran you begin from a very young age. Secondly, being that the Quran is something that isn't seen as an extracurricular activity, but rather it's something embedded within the person's daily activity, his culture, his whole identity. Thirdly, the actual method of using the Lawh, which is the board, the wooden board, where you write, your teacher recites to you, and then you write the portion that you're memorizing. Fourthly, reciting to your teacher and then reviewing it by doing the Subac Method, where you go in a group and then you read 5, 6, 7 ajza per day of the Qur'an, and you're reviewing it and finishing it every single week. And last but not least, putting yourself to the test every year with these Qur'an competitions with up to $20,000 to $30,000. This is the Somali method, which has allowed the Somali community to be ever so proficient in the memorization of the Qur'an, and for them to be like Anas when leading in Taraweeh. This is what it is. And of course, this is also a benefit, and people that are in positions, if it's someone who's a businessman, if it's likewise parents who have the ability to embed the Qur'an in the childhood of their children, them coming up, don't make it a matter of, look, you know what, you have your education, you can do your maths and science and everything else, and inshallah you can do the Quran as a side thing. No, we shouldn't be like that. The Quran should be something that's embedded within our lives. The Quran should be something, when kids are young, it should be a daily thing. It should be an activity which is embedded in their identity. And likewise in the West, unfortunately, we do not see Quran competitions as a big deal. Someone can be, Allahumma barik, a businessman or something, but we don't necessarily see it beneficial to put money and to put our wealth into these kind of things. It would make a huge difference. You know, if we had a Quran competition that the winner gets £100,000, for example, you know, of course we shouldn't necessarily be learning the Quran for money, but we should uplift the Quran. The honor of the Quran is more than £20,000, for example. The honor of the Quran and the weight of the Quran is more than this. So we should be putting in a lot of effort in establishing these kind of competitions, so youngsters can be motivated, inshaAllah ta'ala, and also the meaning for the Quran and the weight of the Quran, the status of the Quran, the honor of the Quran can be uplifted as well, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So one of the things that I must pull up when it comes to Suba is, we're all human beings, okay? So you could be reviewing the Quran with 5, 6, 7 of your classmates, you're reading a page each, you're reading the verse each even. It's highly possible that you don't even catch the error one of your classmates makes. So you could be reading, but someone's missed a verse, for example. What you could do is, Tarteel could solve that problem. As an example, you could put the Tarteel, phone, the app, you can start it, put it in the middle, or one of your friends could actually be just holding it and could use it as a actual reference point, okay? Have the MMD feature on, which is the memorization mistake detection feature, and as you guys are doing your sub'is, just leave it in the middle, and you'll see that if there's anyone who makes a human error where they literally don't catch the mistake, you can have, inshaAllah ta'ala, the app which does that for you in times that no one catches it. Of course, the majority of the time you won't need it, but it'll be there, inshaAllah ta'ala, to catch out any mistakes that no one sees. We are here saying technology preserves tradition, it does not replace it. I know you've all watched the Mauritanian video done by Sheikh Mustafa Shaybani, the most viewed video on our channel. I want to know what your opinion is. I'm not saying the Somali method is better. In fact, you know what? I think the Somali method is better. Personally myself, it's not just because I'm Somali, but I personally think the Somali method is a better method in preserving the Quran and also memorizing it as well. Let us know what you think, inshaAllah ta'ala. Comparing the two methods, write in the comments below what you think is better in terms of preserving and also memorizing as well. We're so glad you enjoyed the video and it was beneficial. Make sure to subscribe, turn on your notifications inshaAllah ta'ala, and share with your friends and family so they can also benefit. If you want to take your Quran journey to another level, join the millions that are using Tarteel to memorize and recite with confidence. Click the link in our description now or search the word Tarteel in the iOS App Store or Google Play.